Cruelty-Free. M.J. Stevens. Chapter 1. The dumpster smelled like money and death. Not the honest kind of death. The expensive kind. Floral top notes fighting with spoiled meat. Chemical sweetness layered over shit and plastic, and something sharp that made the back of the throat itch. Empty bottles rolled underfoot every time the truck hit a bump. Most of them still had labels. Youth Restore Night Serum. Clinically proven. Dermatologist tested. Cruelty-free. Banner woke up first. He was on his side, half buried under a torn black bag, and the first thing he did was the same thing he had always done when something felt wrong. He looked for Gemma. She was there, small and shaking, pressed against a crushed carton of sample tubes. Her eyes were too wide. When Banner nudged her with his nose, she made a tiny sound and shoved her face into the thick fur of his chest like she could hide inside him. The truck kept moving. Every jolt sent more bottles cascading. One of them bounced off Banner's shoulder and left a shiny smear of something that smelled like expensive flowers and hospital cleaner. Jinx was already on her feet. The alley cat stood on a precarious pile of trash bags near the front of the dumpster, ears flat, tail low. She looked like she had been awake for a while and was personally offended by all of it. "Great," she muttered. "Another night in paradise." Sable surfaced next, long-legged and furious. The serval shook garbage off her spotted coat with sharp, elegant movements that somehow still looked expensive even here. She dug with careful teeth until she found the rabbit. Clover was curled tight, eyes squeezed shut, whole body locked. Sable nosed her gently, then more firmly. "Clover, up." The rabbit's eyes opened. For a second the air around her seemed to thicken, like the world had been dipped in syrup. A falling bottle slowed in midair. Then the moment snapped and Clover gasped, pressing herself against Sable's legs. Banner sat up carefully, trying not to crush Gemma. The movement sent another avalanche of product bottles. He waited for the usual sharp protest from his body after a hard night. It didn't come. His shoulder only ached for a moment. Then the ache faded in a way that felt too clean, too smooth. The fur over the spot looked brighter than the rest of him. Gemma trembled harder. She could smell everything. Every chemical, every trace of the animals that hadn't woken up, every ghost of the lab still clinging to their skin. And underneath all of it, nothing. No house. No familiar human hands. No sound of the front door. She pushed the panic outward without meaning to. Banner felt it like a sudden cold weight in his chest. Jinx's ears twitched. Sable's lip curled. Clover made a small broken noise. The truck hit another pothole. Hard. Banner shifted so his bulk took the impact instead of Gemma. Something in his side should have cracked. It didn't. The pain arrived, bright and honest, then drained away like water through clean sand. For a second, under the shifting streetlights that leaked through the gaps in the lid, his coat looked almost airbrushed. Nobody mentioned it. They were 5 animals in a moving dumpster full of the industry's leftovers, still wearing the collars and chips and names that used to mean they belonged to someone. The truck kept driving toward wherever things like them were taken when the testing was done. And for the first time since the lab, none of them were alone. The truck slowed. Banner felt it in his bones before the others did. The engine note changed. The constant vibration softened. Gemma's shaking got worse. Everything that wasn't already braced slid hard toward the open end. Bottles, bags, and bodies poured out in a wet, glittering avalanche. Banner twisted, curling around Gemma as they fell. The impact with the ground should have driven the air from his lungs. Instead, it felt like landing on something that gave just enough and then held. A bright flare of pain across his shoulder blades faded almost immediately, leaving only a strange, clean warmth. Gemma hit the ground inside the circle of his legs and immediately tried to climb him. Her claws found purchase in his fur. The flood of scents hit her like a physical, blow-rotting food, diesel, old blood, and underneath it all the same chemical sweetness that had soaked the dumpster. She whimpered and pushed the worst of it outward without meaning to. Banner's head snapped up. Jinx hissed. Sable's pupils went wide. Clover's breath stuttered. Then Clover's power answered the panic. The world thickened. Falling trash slowed. A rolling bottle turned lazily in the air. Distant truck lights stretched into long orange streaks. For 3 long heartbeats, everything moved like it was underwater, while Clover remained normal speed, frozen in place with her eyes huge. When the effect snapped back, she collapsed against Sable's legs, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Sable didn't waste time. She hooked careful teeth into the scruff of Clover's neck and dragged her clear of the worst of the pile. The leap that followed was too clean. One moment she was on the ground. The next she had cleared a mound of garbage bags in a single silent arc and landed on the far side without a sound. Her coat caught the sodium lights and threw them back in a soft, unnatural glow that made her look like she belonged on a product poster instead of a landfill. She stared down at her own paws, ears flat with offense. Jinx was already moving. She darted between two leaning piles of trash and tried to squeeze through a narrow gap between a rusted washing machine and a stack of broken pallets. Her shoulders passed through the wood like it wasn't entirely there. She got stuck halfway, back and still solid, front and phased, and let out a string of inventive curses while she wiggled free. When she finally popped out the other side, she shook herself hard, leaving a faint, expensive-smelling haze in the air. "I hate this," she announced to no one in particular. "I hate all of this." Banner stood slowly. Gemma stayed pressed to his chest, breathing too fast. He could feel her heart hammering against his ribs. The place they had been dumped was a wide, uneven field of trash under harsh yellow lights. Mountains of black bags, twisted metal, the constant low roar of other trucks in the distance. No fences close enough to matter. No people in sight. Gemma's voice was tiny. "They're not coming." Banner didn't answer right away. He lowered his head and sniffed the air the way he used to when he was checking the yard at night. Nothing familiar came back. No soap from the laundry room. No particular human skin. No home. Sable set Clover down but stayed pressed against her. The serval's tail lashed once. "Our people would have noticed by now," she said. The words sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "They always noticed when we were gone too long." Jinx laughed, short and sharp. "You still think this is a missing pet situation? Look around. We were already gone the second they finished writing their little reports." Clover's ears flattened. She whispered, "I want to go home." No one had an answer for that. Banner looked at Gemma. She was still shaking, but her eyes had gone focused in that sharp, calculating way she got when she was trying to solve a problem bigger than she was. She pressed harder into his side, and the worst of the sensory flood eased, just a little, the way it always did when she could feel him solid and real. "There's water that way," she said quietly, nose pointing past the nearest trash mountain. "And other animals. Living ones. Not like the ones in the bags." Banner's ears came forward. The decision settled into him the same way it always had when Gemma was scared and the world was wrong. He took one step in the direction she indicated, then another. Sable watched him for a long moment, then nudged Clover gently. "We stay together." Jinx rolled her eyes, already picking her way across the uneven ground. "Fine, but if any of you slow me down, I'm leaving you in a tire pile." Clover took one shaky hop, then another, staying close to Sable's legs. Banner glanced back once at the emptied dumpster and the scattered bottles still gleaming under the lights. Youth Restore. Age-defying complex. Visible results in 7 days. Then he turned away and walked. The 5 of them moved into the dark between the trash mountains, still wearing the names and the collars of animals who used to belong to someone, and for the first time none of them looked back. They made it almost to the edge before the dogs found them. 2 big shapes came out of the dark between the last trash mountains, thick-necked, short-haired, the kind of dogs people kept for one job only. Their eyes caught the distant lights. Both of them locked onto Banner first, the largest target, and the low warning rumbles started at the same time. Gemma went rigid against his side. "They smell the lab on us," she whispered. "And the fear. And whatever we are now." Jinx flattened herself against a broken pallet. "Great. Security. Because of course." Sable moved in front of Clover without thinking. Her weight shifted onto her back legs, ready to leap, but the angle was wrong and the ground was soft with old plastic. She hesitated half a second too long. The first guard dog charged. Banner did what he had always done. He stepped forward and met it. The impact should have been ugly. Instead, the other dog hit him like it had run into a padded wall. Banner's feet dug in. His body took the force, and the pain that flared across his chest drained away almost as fast as it arrived, leaving that same clean, wrong warmth. The guard dog bounced off, shook its head, and came in again, confused and angrier. Gemma's power spiked with pure panic. A flood of scents and half-formed images slammed into every animal in range. The chemical burn of the lab, the rolling truck, the moment the dumpster tipped, and underneath it all a sharp, desperate not him, not Banner. The second guard dog staggered mid-stride like it had been slapped across the nose with something invisible. Jinx yowled and clapped her paws over her ears, even though that did nothing. Clover's breath hitched. Time stuttered. For 2 long seconds the charging dog moved through syrup while Clover stayed normal. She used the borrowed moment to bolt sideways on pure instinct, straight under a leaning sheet of corrugated metal. The effect snapped. She collapsed on the other side, gasping. Sable finally launched. She meant to clear the second dog and land between it and Clover. Instead, the power overcorrected. She shot upward in a high, perfect arc that looked ridiculous under the yellow lights, overshot by 10 feet, and came down hard on a pile of loose bags. The landing was silent and graceful. The recovery was not. She scrambled, cursing under her breath in a very undignified way. Jinx tried to do the smart thing. She darted low, aiming for the gap between the 2 dogs and the open ground beyond the fence line. Halfway there, her camouflage flickered on without permission. She vanished from the shoulders up, stayed solid from the belly down, and ran straight into a discarded tire she hadn't seen. The phase effect popped her halfway through the rubber before it failed. She tore free with a furious snarl, leaving a faint, expensive-smelling haze behind her. "I hate this," she spat. Banner took another hit. This one turned him sideways. He felt ribs complain, then stopped complaining. The glossy patch of fur on his shoulder had spread. He looked briefly, unnervingly perfect under the lights while he stood over Gemma and refused to move. The guard dogs were getting frustrated. One of them circled wide, trying to get behind the group. Gemma saw it coming and pushed another raw burst of danger left side that made the dog flinch and snap at empty air. Sable recovered, ears flat with embarrassment, and tried a shorter leap. This time she landed closer to where she meant to, shoulders low, ready. Clover dragged herself up and pressed against the serval's legs, still trembling from the time dilation. Jinx, now fully visible and thoroughly pissed off, did the only thing that made sense to her. She phased just enough to slip under the nearest section of chain link, then popped back to solid on the other side, and immediately started yowling insults at the guard dogs from safety. "Come on, you overfed lawn ornaments." "Yeah, that's right, stay over there." Banner looked at Gemma. She was still shaking, but her eyes were sharp again. "We go," he said, voice low and steady. He backed toward the fence, keeping his body between the guard dogs and the others. Every time one of them lunged, he took it, absorbed it, and let the clean healing do its uncomfortable work. Gemma stayed glued to his side, feeding him the dog's intentions a half-second before they moved. Sable herded Clover along the fence line in short, controlled bursts, still overshooting every other leap, but getting better at correcting midair. Jinx kept up the verbal abuse from the far side, which at least kept one of the dogs focused on her instead of the gap Banner was creating. They didn't look graceful. Banner's glossy patches kept catching the light at the wrong moments. Gemma's telepathic bursts made everyone flinch at random intervals. Sable's landings were silent, but her recoveries were chaotic. Clover's time stutters came in short, panicked flashes that left her exhausted. Jinx's camouflage kept turning on and off like a broken switch. But they moved. One by one they pushed through the narrow gap Banner forced open, scrambled under or through the fence, and kept going into the dark scrub beyond the landfill lights. The guard dogs barked and threw themselves at the chain link, but they didn't follow. When the 5 of them finally stopped, lungs burning, in a shallow ditch a few hundred yards away, silence held for a long moment. Jinx broke the silence first, licking a scrap of tire rubber off her shoulder. "We are so bad at this." Banner sat down heavily. Gemma immediately climbed into the space under his chin. The worst of the sensory noise had faded now that the chemical reek of the dump was behind them. Sable checked Clover over with careful nose and tongue, then sat with her back straight, trying to pretend she hadn't just launched herself into a trash pile like an idiot. Clover's voice was small but steady. "We still made it." Banner looked at each of them and turned Gemma pressed against him. Jinx already scanning the new dark, Sable and Clover close together, and something settled in his chest that had nothing to do with the strange new healing. "Yeah," he said. "We did." Behind them the landfill lights glowed dirty yellow. Ahead of them the city hummed, full of streets and smells and things they didn't understand yet. They were out, clumsy, glowing in places they shouldn't, still learning what their bodies could do. and for the first time since the lab, moving in the same direction on purpose. They stayed in the ditch until the shaking stopped. Banner lay on his side so Gemma could press the full length of her small body against his chest. Her heartbeat was still too fast, but the worst of the chemical scream in her nose had faded. Every so often she sent him a quiet, wordless pulse that just meant still here. He answered the only way he knew how, by not moving, by being solid. Jinx paced a short line along the top of the ditch, low and restless. Every few passes her camouflage flickered on for no reason, turning her into a floating set of paws and an irritated tail before it failed again. She muttered under her breath the whole time. Sable sat with her spine very straight, Clover tucked against her belly. The serval kept licking the same spot on Clover's shoulder, over and over, the way she used to when the rabbit had gotten into something she shouldn't. The gesture was pure old home habit. It looked strange out here in the weeds and broken glass. Clover was the first to speak. "My legs feel wrong," she said quietly. "Like they want to go faster than the rest of me." Sable's tongue paused. "Everything feels wrong." Jinx stopped pacing. "No shit." Banner lifted his head. The glossy patches on his shoulder and chest still caught the thin morning light in a way that looked expensive and slightly sick. He nosed Gemma's ear. "You okay?" Gemma didn't answer right away. She was listening to things none of the others could hear: distant engines, a dog barking 3 streets over, the faint chemical trace of the landfill still clinging to their fur. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. "I can still smell the bottles. Even out here. It's like it's in us now." The others let that sit. A long moment passed. Somewhere nearby, a delivery truck backed up with a high-pitched beep. The ordinary sound felt almost rude. Jinx sat down hard, tail lashing. "So, are we doing the stupid thing where we try to go home? Or are we admitting that home is gone and we need a new plan before something with a truck or a net finds us?" Sable's ears flattened. "Our people dash. Your people think you're missing," Jinx cut in. "Or stolen. Or dead. They are not going to look in a landfill for a serval and a rabbit that came back wrong. And even if they did, what are you going to do? Walk up to the door looking like that?" She jerked her chin at Sable's still glowing coat and Banner's airbrushed patches. "They'll call someone. Someone with gloves and a van." Clover's ears folded back. She pressed harder into Sable. Banner was quiet for a while. He had always been the one who waited by the door. The one who believed the sound of the key in the lock meant everything was going to be all right again. That belief felt heavier now, like something he was still carrying out of loyalty, even though it no longer fit. Gemma shifted against him. "I tried to listen for the house," she said. "For the specific way it smelled. It's not there. Or we're too far. Or it's gone." She swallowed. "I don't think we can go back the way we were." Sable looked down at Clover, then at the others. The elegant line of her shoulders slumped a fraction. "Then what are we?" Jinx snorted. "Currently, a very noticeable group of science experiments with bad timing and worse control." Banner stood up. The movement was careful, testing. Nothing hurt the way it should have. That still bothered him. "We're together," he said simply. "That's the part that isn't wrong." Gemma climbed to her feet beside him, small and shaking but upright. "He's right. Whatever we are now, we figure it out together. Or we don't figure it out at all." Clover's voice was barely louder than the weeds moving in the breeze. "I don't want to be alone again." Sable's answer was immediate. "You won't be." Jinx looked at all of them, then away, then back. Her camouflage flickered once more and died. She sighed like the entire situation was a personal inconvenience she had decided to tolerate. "Fine. We stay together. We keep moving. And the first one of you who starts glowing in public has to deal with the screaming humans." Banner glanced toward the low sprawl of buildings in the distance. The city was waking up ordinary sounds, ordinary smells, none of which had any room for 5 animals who had been thrown away and come back different. "We move at dusk," he said. "Find somewhere quiet to learn what we can actually do without almost dying every time." Gemma nodded against his leg. Sable helped Clover stand. Jinx was already scanning the nearest cover, calculating routes the way she always had. They rested a little longer in the ditch as the sun climbed, 5 mismatched shapes that no longer fit the lives they had been stolen from. When the light started to soften again, they stood as a group, still clumsy with their new bodies, still carrying the chemical residue of the products that had changed them, and started walking toward whatever came next. Chapter 2. They found the place just after full dark. An old loading yard behind a row of shuttered warehouses, half swallowed by weeds and chain link that had given up years ago. A collapsed lean-to of corrugated metal offered a dry corner. The ground was packed dirt and broken concrete. No cameras. No lights close enough to matter. A faint laboratory sweetness still lingered in the air, but it was weaker here. Banner checked the perimeter the way he used to check the yard at home, slow, methodical, nose low. When he came back, he simply laid down with his back to the open side. Gemma immediately claimed the space against his chest. Jinx disappeared into the shadows along the fence and reappeared a minute later looking unimpressed. Clear. For now. There's a raccoon family in the next lot who already hate us on principle. Sable nosed Clover into the deepest part of the lean-to, then sat with her body between the rabbit and the open dark. The serval's coat still threw an occasional soft gleam when she moved, like residual product that refused to fade. For a long time, only the city spoke around them. Distant traffic, a siren that never came closer, a dog barking twice somewhere before falling quiet. Gemma was the one who broke the quiet. "We should try," she said. "On purpose. While nothing's trying to kill us." Jinx made a face. "Or we could not, and just sit here being quietly horrified like normal people." Banner lifted his head. "She's right. Better here than when it matters." Sable's ears flicked. She looked at her own long legs like they belonged to someone else. "I keep overshooting. It's undignified." Clover's voice was small. "Mine only happens when I'm scared. I don't know how to make it happen when I'm not." Jinx sighed the sigh of someone who had already lost the argument. "Fine. But if any of you explode or start glowing bright enough to see from the street, I'm leaving." They started with Banner. He stood, planted his feet, and let Sable carefully, apologetically drive a shoulder into his side with as much force as she could manage. The impact landed. Pain flared, bright and honest. Then it drained, leaving the same clean warmth and a wider glossy patch across his ribs. Banner shook himself, looking faintly disgusted by how good the fur looked. "It still feels like cheating," he muttered. Gemma went next. She sat very still, eyes half closed, and tried to reach outward without the panic. At first there was only static city smells, distant animals, the leftover chemical taste in their own coats. Then, slowly, she found the raccoon family Jinx had mentioned. She didn't push fear this time. Just a careful, wordless "we're not hunting you." The raccoon's answering suspicion came back sharp and offended. Gemma flinched, but she didn't lose the connection. "I can do it without screaming," she said, almost surprised. "It's just louder when I'm scared." Sable practiced short leaps across the yard. The first two sent her into the fence. The third was better, still too high, still too graceful, but she landed where she meant to and only looked mildly murderous about it. After the fifth try, the soft glow along her shoulders had faded to almost nothing. Clover was harder. She tried to call the time dilation on purpose and got nothing. Banner sat in front of her and let her press her face into his chest. Gemma sent a tiny, controlled pulse of remembered panic, just enough. The air thickened for a single heartbeat. A falling leaf slowed. Then the effect slipped away and Clover sat down hard, breathing fast. "It's still mostly fear," she said, "but I felt the edge of it." Jinx refused to perform on command. She simply walked the length of the lean-to, and halfway along her body flickered out of solid sight for 3 full strides before snapping back. She looked at her own paws like they had betrayed her. "I didn't tell it to do that." "Maybe it likes you," Gemma offered. "It can stop." They kept at it in short, clumsy rounds until the worst of the shaking had settled into something more like exhaustion. No one was good yet. No one was safe. But the powers had stopped feeling like pure accidents. Afterward, they crowded back into the lean-to. Banner took the outside. Gemma curled under his chin. Sable and Clover shared the deepest corner. Jinx claimed a high spot on a broken crate where she could see the yard. For a while there was only breathing in the distant city. Then Sable spoke, voice low. "In the house I used to watch the commercials. The ones with the soft lighting and the women touching their faces. They always said the same things. Visible results. Age-defying. Cruelty-free." She looked at her own still too perfect coat. "I keep thinking we are the part they never showed." The thought settled over the group without argument. Clover's ears shifted. "Do you think the other animals in the bags, do you think any of them woke up too?" Jinx's tail tip twitched. "If they did, they're either smarter than us or already dead again." Banner was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, the words were simple. We're not going back to being what we were, even if we could. So we learn this. We stay useful to each other, and we don't let anyone put us in another dumpster. Gemma pressed closer. Together. Together, Clover echoed. Sable gave a single, sharp nod. Jinx looked out over the dark yard and the distant lights. Her camouflage flickered once, almost like a shrug. Yeah. Together. Now someone take first watch so I can pretend this is all a very bad dream. Banner lifted his head and scanned the open ground. Gemma's senses stretched a little farther than before, mapping the quiet. Sable settled with Clover against her. Jinx closed her eyes but didn't sleep. Outside the lean-to, the city kept moving, full of people who still believed the bottles when they said cruelty-free. Inside it, 5 animals who knew better began the long work of learning what they had become. Chapter 3. Hunger arrived on schedule. By the second night in the loading yard, the hollow feeling had moved from background noise to something sharp. Banner felt it first in the way his healing slowed when he tested a small cut on his leg. The clean warmth still came, but it took longer and left him shaky afterward. Gemma noticed every time his breathing changed. She didn't say anything. She just pressed closer. Jinx returned from a scouting loop with her tail low. There's a row of restaurants 3 streets over. Dumpsters. Real ones. Not the industrial kind. Smells like actual food instead of expired serum. Sable's nose wrinkled. We are not eating out of dumpsters again. You got a better plan, princess? Because the raccoons already told me to get lost, and I'm pretty sure the only groceries around here come with people attached. Clover looked between them. What if the people see us? Banner stood. The glossy patches on his coat had faded to almost normal in the dark, but they still caught light when he moved. We go quiet. Take what we can. Get out. No heroes. Gemma's ears flicked. I can listen ahead. Tell us if anyone's coming. They left the lean-to in a tight group, staying to the deepest shadows. The city at night was louder and brighter than the landfill. Streetlights. Occasional cars. The smell of cooking oil and garbage and human lives stacked on top of each other. The restaurant alley was narrow and wet. 3 big dumpsters sat against a brick wall under a single flickering light. The smell was almost overwhelming after days of chemical residue, garlic, old bread, meat that had started to turn something sweet. Jinx went first, low and fast. Her camouflage held for a full 10 seconds this time before flickering. She reached the nearest dumpster, braced her back legs, and tried to push the lid. It was heavier than it looked. She phased the front half of her body through the plastic, got stuck at the hips, and let out a furious, muffled string of curses until she wiggled free. I hate lids, she muttered. Sable took a short leap to the top of the middle dumpster. She landed cleanly for once, almost silent, and immediately looked offended that the surface was greasy. She hooked the lid with one paw and dragged it open. The smell rolled out stronger. Banner moved to the open dumpster and began pulling bags free with careful teeth, dropping them where the others could reach. Gemma stayed at the alley mouth, eyes half closed, senses stretched. Every few seconds, she sent a quiet pulse. Clear, clear, footsteps 2 streets over, not coming this way. Clover stayed near Sable's landing spot, ready to run. Her back legs kept twitching with unused energy. They worked fast and messy. Banner's strength made tearing the bags easy, but every time he put real force into it, the healing itch flared under his skin like it was preparing for an injury that never came. Jinx darted in and out of partial camouflage, dragging smaller packages. Sable passed things down to Clover with surprising gentleness. They had a small pile, half a loaf of bread, some chicken bones still with meat, a crushed container of rice when Gemma's pulse changed. Human. Close. Coming from the kitchen door. A rectangle of yellow light cut across the alley. A man in a stained apron stepped out with a bag of trash, humming under his breath. He was halfway to the dumpsters before he saw them. He froze. Banner was the most obvious, large, solid, standing over the open bags. The man's eyes went wide. Then they flicked to Sable on top of the dumpster, long-legged and wrong in the city light, and to the small shapes moving around them. What the hell? Gemma didn't think. She pushed. A sharp, wordless burst of threat. Big dog, stay back, slammed into the man hard enough that he took a step backward and dropped the trash bag. At the same moment, Clover's fear spiked. Time stuttered. The man's next breath stretched. The falling bag slowed in the air. Sable used the borrowed second to drop from the dumpster in one clean motion and land between Clover and the human. Jinx's camouflage snapped on completely for the first time. She vanished except for the faint, expensive-smelling haze she left behind. Banner did the only thing that made sense to him. He placed himself fully between the man and the others, head low, and let out a single deep warning sound that was pure old protective instinct. The glossy patches across his shoulders caught the kitchen light and threw it back in a soft, unnatural sheen. The man stared. Then he did what most people do when the world stops making sense for a few seconds. He decided he hadn't seen it. He backed up, hands raised, muttering something about damn strays and need to call animal control in the morning, and retreated into the kitchen. The door swung shut. The yellow light disappeared. Time snapped back to normal. Clover sat down hard. Jinx reappeared beside a drain pipe, breathing fast. Sable's fur was puffed along her spine. No one moved for a long moment. Then Jinx said, very quietly, "He looked right at us and decided we were normal." Gemma's voice was shaky. "I think I made him want to. A little." Banner nosed the food pile. "We take it and go. Now." They gathered what they could carry and left the alley faster than they had entered. They stayed silent until the restaurant lights were far behind them and the darker side streets closed in again. Back in the loading yard, they dropped the food in the center of the lean-to and sat around it like it might disappear. Banner waited until Gemma had eaten before he took anything. Sable made sure Clover got the softer pieces. Jinx ate like someone who had never trusted a full meal. Afterward, the quiet felt different. Clover licked a grain of rice from her paw and said, "He was going to call someone." "Animal control," Jinx said. "Or the cops. Or both. We're not invisible." "Not really." Sable stared at the dark open yard. "In the commercials, the animals are always happy. Soft lighting. Clean bowls. No one ever shows the part where they end up in a dumpster." Banner lay down so Gemma could curl against him again. The healing warmth under his skin had settled, but the hollow feeling of hunger was only partly gone. "We're not those animals anymore," he said. "And we're not going back in a van for anyone." Gemma's small voice answered him, steady now. "Then we learn how to be harder to see. And harder to catch. And we don't steal from the same place twice." Jinx gave a short, reluctant huff that might have been agreement. Sable looked at Clover, then at the others, and nodded once. Outside, the city kept its ordinary rhythm. Somewhere a man in an apron was probably telling himself he had only seen strays. Somewhere else, bottles of Youth Restore and Age-Defying Complex sat on shelves with the words "Cruelty-Free" printed neatly on the front. In the lean-to, 5 animals who knew the asterisk finished the last of the stolen food and began, quietly, to plan for the next night. Chapter 4. They started before the sun was fully up. The loading yard was still in shadow. The air smelled of wet concrete and the manufactured sweetness that never quite left their coats. Banner stood in the open center while the others watched from the edge of the lean-to. "Again," Gemma said. Sable launched. This time she did not overshoot. The leap carried her in a clean, controlled arc across the yard. She landed exactly where she intended, paused silent on the packed dirt, and held the stance for 3 full seconds before the residual glow along her shoulders flickered and died. She looked almost surprised. "Better," she said, as if the word itself were undignified. Clover went next. She sat in front of Banner, pressed her forehead to his chest, and breathed the way Gemma had coached her. Slow, deliberate. The remembered edge of fear was still there, but she no longer needed the full spike. The air around her thickened for a short, steady count of 4. A drifting piece of paper slowed, hung, then resumed its fall when she released the effect. Clover's legs trembled afterward, but she stayed upright. "I felt the edge and held it," she whispered. "I didn't have to drown in it." Gemma's turn was quieter. She sat with her eyes closed and reached outward without pushing panic. The map of the surrounding blocks came back clearer than before. Raccoons still offended in the next lot, a pair of stray cats 3 rooftops over, the distant metallic taste of a delivery truck 2 streets away. She filtered. She chose. When she opened her eyes, she looked tired but steady. "I can keep the volume down," she said. "It's still loud. Just not screaming." Jinx refused to be scheduled. She simply walked the length of the fence line, and for the first time the camouflage stayed on for the entire distance. She vanished completely, reappeared at the far corner, and sat down like it had been her idea all along. "Still not listening to me," she muttered, but there was less heat in it. Banner went last. He braced while Sable hit him again, harder this time. The impact landed. Pain flared. The clean healing answered faster than it had the night before, and the glossy patch that followed was smaller, more controlled. He shook out his coat, and the unnatural sheen faded within a minute instead of lingering. "It's learning me," he said quietly. "Or I'm learning it." They ran the sequence again. And again. Short rounds. Rest between. No one pushed until collapse. By the time the sun cleared the warehouse roofs, the difference was visible. Sable could land where she meant to more often than not. Clover could call a short, stable dilation without needing full terror. Gemma could listen without flooding the others. Jinx could hold the camouflage long enough to matter. Banner's healing no longer announced itself with a full cosmetic light show. None of it was perfect. None of it was safe. But it was no longer pure accident. They broke for water rain collected in a rusted lid, and the quiet that followed felt different from the exhausted silences of the previous nights. Sable spoke first, eyes on her own paws. "In the house I used to jump to the top of the bookcase in one motion. It was easy. This is larger, but it is starting to feel like mine instead of something left on me." Clover leaned against her. "Mine still tastes like fear, but less. Like I can borrow it without letting it keep me." Gemma looked at Banner. "When I push on purpose, it doesn't hurt you as much. I can feel the difference." Banner nosed her ear. "Good." Jinx stretched out on the broken crate, tail hanging. "Don't get sentimental. We're still a collection of lab leftovers who glow sometimes and scare restaurant guys. But," she paused, then gave the smallest shrug, "we're less likely to get ourselves killed by accident." "That's new." Banner looked toward the city beyond the fence. "We keep practicing," he said. "But from now on, practice has to buy us something. Food. Distance. A way out." Jinx flicked her tail. "Finally, a training philosophy I can respect." They returned to the lean-to before the streets fully woke. None of them trusted their new bodies yet. For the first time, though, they trusted what the others would do when something went wrong. Chapter 5. What they'd learned made the next night's run almost quiet. They moved through the side streets in a tighter formation than before. Gemma listened 3 blocks ahead and fed the group only what mattered clear, one human on a phone half a street over, turning away. Sable took the high route along a low wall, landing where she intended every time. The residual glow kept small and brief. Jinx stayed fully camouflaged for long stretches, appearing only when she needed to signal. Clover held a short, steady dilation twice, once to let Banner cross an open gap unseen, once to give Sable an extra second to adjust a landing. Banner's healing stayed mostly internal. When he brushed a sharp edge of metal, the pain flared and faded without the full cosmetic announcement. They took food from a different alley behind a closed bakery. No one came out. No one saw them. They were gone in under 4 minutes. Back in the loading yard, they ate in a calmer silence than the previous nights. The powers still sat strangely under their skin, but they no longer felt like pure accidents waiting to happen. It was Gemma who noticed the first trace. She had stretched her senses farther than usual while the others finished the last of the bread, mapping the quiet blocks around their yard the way she now did every night. Most of it was ordinary. Then she caught something new, a sharp, focused attention that did not belong to another animal. She went still against Banner's side. "Someone's talking about us," she said. The others looked at her. Not close. 2, maybe 3 streets over. A human, sitting in a car. He's got a radio or a phone, and he's describing animals that don't match. Large dog with weird shiny patches. A tall spotted cat that jumps too far. A small dog that makes people feel things. He's telling someone else to keep an eye on this side of the industrial lots. Jinx's ears flattened. Animal control? Maybe. Or private. He smells like coffee and old paper and a little bit of the same chemical scent we carry. Not strong. Like he walked through a place that used to have it. Sable's tail tip twitched. "The restaurant man." Banner's voice was low. "He told someone." Clover pressed closer to Sable. "Are they looking for us?" Gemma listened longer, filtering. "Not actively hunting. Not yet. It's more like a report. Something odd got written down. They're curious, and they're staying in the car for now." Jinx stood and paced a short line. Her camouflage flickered on and off with her agitation. Curiosity turns into nets and vans. We knew this was coming. Banner looked at the dark open yard, then at each of them. Their growing control had bought them cleaner movement and quieter thefts. It had not made them invisible to the world they moved through. "We changed the pattern," he said. "New resting place tomorrow night. Farther from the restaurants we've already hit. No more than one stop per night. Gemma keeps the long watch. If that car moves closer, we leave immediately." Sable nodded once. "I can scout rooftops at dusk. See if there are more eyes." Clover's voice was small but steady. "I can give us extra seconds if we need to disappear fast." Jinx stopped pacing. "I'll find us a better hole. Somewhere with more than one way out." Gemma stayed pressed to Banner, still listening. The focused human attention remained in the car, patient, not yet closing in. But it was there a first thin thread connecting their existence back to the ordinary world that had already discarded them once. Banner lowered his head, so his muzzle rested briefly against Gemma's. The healing warmth under his skin was quiet. The residue in their coats felt sharper now that someone else had noticed it too. "We're leaving traces," he said. "Even when we're careful." That truth did not need an answer. They took turns on watch for the rest of the night. Gemma kept her senses stretched toward the distant car until it finally started its engine and drove away in the early hours. The attention faded with it, but the knowledge did not. The control was real now. So was the fact that the city had begun, in small ways, to notice that something that should have stayed discarded was still moving through its alleys. When the sun rose fully, they rested in the lean-to one last time, already planning the move to a new den, already quieter and more deliberate than they had been the night they climbed out of the dumpster. Somewhere beyond the fence a report existed with incomplete descriptions and a vague location. Somewhere else, bottles still sat on shelves promising visible results and cruelty-free formulas. In the yard, 5 animals who had been thrown away finished their quiet practice and prepared to become harder to follow. Chapter 6. They moved at dusk the next day. Jinx had found the new place an abandoned auto shop 2 neighborhoods farther from the restaurant strip, half hidden behind a row of overgrown lots. The roof was mostly intact. 2 exits. A raised concrete bay that gave Banner a solid defensive position and Sable a high perch. The chemical trace in the air was thinner here. Ordinary city decay instead of industrial beauty waste. They traveled in the improved formation. Gemma filtered the streets ahead. Sable took the high lines where she could. Jinx stayed gone for long stretches. Clover held short dilations only when an open gap needed covering. Banner moved at the center, steady, the glossy patches under control. No one followed. The distant car from the night before did not reappear. They reached the auto shop without incident and spent the first hour checking every corner, every broken window, every possible approach. When Banner finally lay down in the concrete bay with Gemma against his chest, the others settled into their chosen spots with something that almost resembled routine. It did not last. Gemma's head came up sharply an hour after full dark. "There's something at the fence line," she said. "Not human. Animal. But it knows we're here. It's not afraid the way the raccoons were. It's curious, and it smells a little like us." Jinx was already at the nearest broken window, camouflage flickering. "Define like us. Chemical. Faint. And the same wrongness under the skin." Sable moved to Clover's side without being asked. Banner stood. They did not have to wait long. A lean, scarred shape slipped through a gap in the chain link and stopped in the open lot outside the shop. A dog medium-sized, mixed breed, coat dull and uneven. One ear was notched. It stood very still, nose working, and then it spoke in the same wordless way they had begun to use with each other. "You smell like the bottles." Gemma translated the pulse for the others, though most of them felt it directly now. Banner stepped into the open doorway, large and solid, but he did not growl. Gemma stayed close against his front leg. The stranger dog's eyes flicked over the group. Banner's size, Sable's height and spots, Jinx's half-visible form, Clover's small tense shape, and something like recognition settled into its posture. "I was in a different place," the stranger sent. "Smaller lab. Different labels. Same trucks. Same dumpsters. I woke up alone. Been moving for weeks. Kept smelling the same ghost on the wind the last 2 nights. Followed it here." Jinx's camouflage dropped completely. "Great. We're leaving a trail even for the ones like us." Sable's voice was careful. "Are there more?" The stranger dog's tail gave a single low sweep. "Some. Most don't last. Some go strange and stay that way. A few learn to hide. I don't know numbers." I only know the ones who smell like leftover product and refuse to die when they should. Clover took a small hop forward, then stopped. Did you have people? Before. The stranger was quiet for a moment. Yes. Then I didn't. Same as you, I'm guessing. Banner studied the other dog. No open threat. Hunger, caution, and the same residual chemical signature they all carried. All that practice suddenly felt smaller against the idea that the landfill and the labs had produced more than just the 5 of them. What's your name? Banner asked. The stranger dog tilted its head. Used to have one. Doesn't fit anymore. You can call me Rook if you need a word. Jinx snorted. Of course it's Rook. Gemma kept listening, mapping the surrounding blocks while the conversation happened. No human attention nearby. No new cars. Only the ordinary night and this new presence that had followed their traces on purpose. Banner made the decision the same way he made most of them quietly, after checking on Gemma with a glance. You can stay the night, he said. Edge of the shop. We share what food we have. In the morning we talk about whether you move on or whether this becomes more than one night. Rook's posture eased a fraction. Fair. They brought the stranger inside the fence line, but not fully into the concrete bay. Food was divided without ceremony. Rook ate like something that had learned not to trust a full meal. The 5 watched. The 5 were watched in return. Later, when the others had settled into uneasy rest, Gemma spoke quietly against Banner's chest. There are more of us, she said. Not just the 5. The labs and the dumpsters made others. And we're leaving enough of a trail that the ones who survive can find it. Banner's answer was a low rumble of acknowledgement. Outside, the city continued not to know what had been thrown away and refused to stay gone. Inside the auto shop, 6 animals who carried the same chemical ghost shared a fragile, temporary quiet 5 who had chosen each other, and one who had followed the traces they could no longer keep from leaving behind. The powers sat steadier under their skin than they had the week before. The world had begun to notice, and the first real proof that they were not the only ones had just walked out of the dark and asked to stay the night. Chapter 7. Morning came slow and gray. Rook had stayed at the edge of the concrete bay through the night, not quite inside the group's space, not quite outside it. When the others began to stir, he was already awake, watching the open lot with the steady patience of something that had learned to sleep lightly. Banner stood first. Gemma stayed against his leg while she stretched her senses outward in a wide, careful sweep. No human attention nearby. No new cars. Only ordinary morning noise and the faint chemical signature that now belonged to 6 of them instead of 5. They ate the last of the previous night's food in silence. Then Banner looked at Rook. Talk, he said. Rook's notched ear flicked. I don't need a pack. I survived alone. But moving alone means every night is a new risk of nets or worse. You 5 move cleaner than most I've seen. You practice. You watch each other. That's rare. Jinx, perched on a rusted tool cabinet, narrowed her eyes. We're not a charity. Didn't ask for charity. I can scout. I know which alleys the night trucks use. I know which dumpsters belong to places that call animal control the same night, and which ones wait 3 days. I know the smell of the private vans that don't have city markings. Sable's tail tip moved once. Private vans. Some of the labs don't like loose ends, Rook sent. Even the ones that think everything in the dumpsters stayed dead. They pay people to watch for strays that look wrong. Shiny coats. Animals that move too far or too quiet. Reports get collected. Sometimes the vans show up. Gemma's small body went tight against Banner. The car from 2 nights ago. Rook gave a low acknowledgement. Could be. Curiosity first. Then paperwork. Then something with a net and a quiet engine. Clover looked from Sable to Banner. If we let him stay, we become easier to find. More of us means more traces. Banner was quiet for a long moment. He checked Gemma with a glance, then the others. Their new discipline made them harder to catch in the moment. It had not stopped the trail they left simply by existing. You stay on the edge until we say otherwise, Banner said. You share what you know. You don't bring trouble to this place on purpose. If the vans get close, we move together or we cut you loose. Clear. Rook's tail swept once against the concrete. Clear. Jinx muttered something that sounded like, this is how it starts, but did not argue further. In the afternoon, Gemma caught the second trace. A different human attention, farther out than the first car had been. Not a radio conversation this time. A phone call. Fragments reached her through the city's noise. Industrial side. Possible match on the shiny dog. Tall cat reported near the bakery alley. Keep it informal for now. She relayed it without panic. They're starting to connect the sightings, she said. Still not a full hunt. But the reports are being put next to each other. Rook's notched ear angled toward her. That's how it goes. One odd report is a stray. 2 or 3 become a pattern. Patterns get attention. Sable looked at the open bay doors. Then we leave fewer of them. They adjusted the plan before night fully settled. No restaurant alleys for the next 2 nights. Food from quieter sources farther out. Rook knew a pair of apartment dumpsters that rarely drew complaints. Travel routes changed. Gemma kept a continuous long watch for the focused human attention. Sable added rooftop checks at dusk and dawn. Jinx mapped every secondary exit from the auto shop. Clover practiced triggering short dilations on a neutral cue instead of fear alone. Banner's healing stayed tight and quiet. When they finally moved out after dark, the formation included a 6th shape at the edge. Rook stayed slightly apart, but he matched their pace and answered Gemma's directional pulses without needing extra explanation. They took food cleanly. No close calls. No new witnesses. The chemical scent in their coats was still there for anyone who knew how to notice it, but their tighter routes and better command of their abilities left less of a story behind them. Back at the auto shop, they divided the food and settled into the concrete bay. Rook took his place at the edge again. No one invited him closer. No one told him to leave. Gemma spoke quietly once the others had begun to rest. "We're not invisible," she said against Banner's chest. "Even careful, we leave pieces of ourselves in the city. And now there are more eyes, human ones, and ones like us." Banner's answer was simple. "Then we keep getting better at choosing which pieces we leave. And who finds them?" Outside, the night held 2 different kinds of attention. The distant, patient human curiosity that was starting to draw lines between sightings, and the nearer presence of other discarded animals who could smell the same bottles on the wind. Inside, 6 creatures who should have stayed dead in the dumpsters shared the dark and the first real understanding that their survival was no longer a private fact. Chapter 8. The closer brush came on the 3rd night out of the auto shop. Rook had led them to a quieter stretch of apartment dumpsters on the far side of a low residential block. The route was longer, the smells less rich, but the risk of immediate reports was lower. They moved in the tightened formation that now included him at the edge, Gemma filtering ahead, Sable on the high lines, Jinx gone for long stretches, Clover holding short dilations only when needed, Banner at the center, Rook slightly apart, but matching pace. They were midway through pulling usable food when Gemma's pulse changed hard. Human. Close. Moving quiet. Not the restaurant kind. This one is looking. Rook's notched ear snapped forward. Vent smell. Private. I know it. A dark panel van without city markings rolled slowly past the mouth of the alley and stopped. The side door slid open just enough for a man in plain clothes to step out holding a long catch pole and a small flashlight. He swept the beam once, professional and unhurried. Banner's voice was barely audible. Move. They did faster and cleaner than they could have managed a week earlier. Jinx's camouflage locked on fully. She became a faint, expensive-smelling haze that slipped along the wall. Sable took Clover in a single precise leap to the top of a low garage roof and kept going. Gemma stayed glued to Banner's side, feeding him the man's position in tight, controlled pulses instead of raw panic. Clover dropped a short, steady dilation that stretched the moment the flashlight beam swung toward the dumpsters, giving Banner and Rook the extra seconds to clear the open ground. Rook's knowledge paid off immediately. He cut left through a gap between fences that none of the others would have trusted, leading them into a narrow service corridor between buildings that smelled of old oil and wet cardboard. The corridor opened onto a different street, out of the van's direct line. They did not stop moving until 3 blocks of irregular turns later. Silence lasted until Banner found a deep shadow under a broken loading dock and the group piled into it. Gemma listened hard. The focused human attention stayed near the original alley for several minutes, then began a slow grid search of the surrounding streets. It did not lock onto them. "They're still looking," she whispered. "But they don't have us." Rook's sides heaved once. "That van belongs to a contractor the labs use when they want quiet cleanup. This isn't animal control or police work. They get paid to make certain kinds of strays disappear without paperwork." Jinx reappeared fully, fur bristled. So the traces got expensive. Sable checked Clover over with quick, careful attention. "We leave that whole grid alone. Permanently." Banner nodded. The healing warmth under his skin was quiet. Nobody had taken a real hit. What they'd learned had turned what could have been a capture into a clean extraction. Rook's routes had made the difference between almost and not. They were still catching their breath when the third problem arrived. Gemma's head came up again, sharper this time. "Another one like us," she said. "Close. Moving in. And it doesn't feel curious. It feels hungry. Angry." Rook went rigid. "I know that signature. Big. Unstable. I smelled it once near the old rail yards and left the same night. It doesn't talk. It takes." A heavy shape shouldered through the weeds at the edge of the loading dock light. Another dog larger than Rook, coat patchy and wrong, one eye clouded, the chemical ghost rolling off it in waves strong enough that even Banner could taste it. Its power was already leaking. The concrete under its paws' hairline cracked with every step, and the air around it shimmered with heat that had nothing to do with weather. It fixed on Banner first, then on the food they still carried, then on the smaller shapes of Gemma and Clover. It did not send words. Only pressure and intent. "Mine. Leave it. Or become it." Jinx's voice was flat. "Of course." The unstable dog charged. Banner met it head-on. The impact was harder than anything the guard dogs had delivered. Pain flared bright across his chest and shoulder. The clean healing answered immediately, controlled and tight. The glossy flare kept small. He held ground and refused to give the alley behind him. Gemma pushed a focused burst, not panic, but a sharp, directed pulse of pain and disorientation from the left that made the attacker's clouded eyes seize for a half-second. Sable launched from the dock in a precise arc, landed on the unstable dog's shoulders, and used the momentum to drive it sideways instead of trying to overpower it. Clover dropped a clean dilation that slowed the attacker's next lunge just long enough for Rook to slam into its exposed flank and force it further offline. Jinx appeared out of full camouflage directly in front of its face, yowled a raw insult, and vanished again, drawing a blind snap of teeth that met only air. They did not try to kill it. They drove it. Every time the unstable dog tried to recenter on the food or the smaller animals, the group shifted, Banner absorbing and holding, Gemma disrupting, Sable redirecting force, Clover stealing seconds, Jinx harassing from invisibility, Rook using his knowledge of the local fences to keep cutting off its angles. Their discipline made the difference. A week earlier the fight would have scattered them. Now they stayed a unit. The unstable dog finally broke. It gave one last crack of concrete under its paws, sent a wave of heat that singed the weeds, and lumbered back into the dark the way it had come, still leaking power and rage. Silence settled hard. Rook spoke first, breathing rough. "It will remember this place. And us." Banner stood over Gemma while the last of the healing warmth faded from his chest. "Then we don't stay." They gathered the scattered food in silence and moved again before the private van's search pattern could widen far enough to catch the noise of the fight. Rook led them through another set of service corridors and fence cuts to a different temporary hole and empty utility shed behind a long-closed car wash, farther still from the grids that had already been marked. Inside the shed, the six of them settled in a tighter arrangement than the night before. Rook no longer sat quite as far at the edge. No one commented on it. Gemma listened for a long time after the others began to rest. The private van continued its slow search of the original neighborhood and then, eventually, drove away. The unstable dog's angry signature faded into the wider dark. No new human attention locked onto their current location. But the traces were no longer abstract. A contractor van had come looking with a catch pole. Reports were being connected, and at least one other discarded animal had followed the same chemical scent with the intent to take rather than join. Banner lay with Gemma against his chest, Sable and Clover close on one side, Jinx high on a shelf of old tires, Rook near the single exit. The power sat steady under their skin. The control was real. So was the cost of being visible enough to leave a trail that both humans and the wrong kind of survivors could follow. Outside, the city kept its ordinary secrets. Inside the shed, the group that had started as 5 discarded pets and 1 stranger finished the night closer, more careful, and fully aware that survival was no longer only about learning their own bodies. It was also about deciding what to do with everything their existence had started to wake up. Chapter 9. The utility shed stayed quiet for 3 full days. No vans. No new reports close enough for Gemma to catch. No angry signatures on the wind. Rain ticked against the thin metal roof and washed some of the landfill sweetness out of their coats. For the first time since the dumpster, nothing was actively trying to find them. They used the quiet differently than before. There was practice, but no one needed the old ritual of taking turns and announcing what had improved. Sable crossed the roofline when she wanted height. Clover borrowed 3 or 4 slow seconds when a falling bottle or loose sheet of tin gave her something harmless to work against. Jinx disappeared whenever she was bored, which was often. Banner's healing had stopped turning him glossy unless the injury was hard enough to matter. Gemma listened because listening had become part of the way she breathed. Rook joined the perimeter checks without being invited. On the second afternoon, he returned through the broken side door carrying the smell of rain, motor oil, and a neighborhood none of the others knew. 2 private vans 3 miles east, he sent. Not moving together. One parked behind a veterinary supply warehouse. One circling the rail district. Jinx opened one eye from the tire stack. You say that like veterinary supply warehouse isn't the least comforting phrase you've used all week. Rook ignored her. The warehouse has no public entrance on the backside. Cameras. New locks. Old dog smell. Chemical ghost under bleach. Gemma's head lifted. Like us. Maybe. Too much bleach to separate it. Banner did not answer immediately. 3 days earlier, he would have filed the information under places to avoid. Now the silence that followed felt different. They all understood what a building like that might mean. Clover looked toward the rain-dark opening. If there are animals in there. Sable pressed one shoulder against her. We don't know that there are. No, Clover said. We just know somebody worked very hard to make it smell like there aren't. Jinx sat up. I liked her better when she was terrified of everything. Clover looked at her. Jinx sighed. That was a joke. That evening, while the others shared the last dry pieces of bread Rook had found behind a grocery store, the conversation finally turned toward the thing none of them had wanted to name. Home. Gemma remembered the living room floor and the square of afternoon sun that used to move across it. Sable remembered clean bowls lined along a wall. Clover remembered the sound of a refrigerator opening from 3 rooms away. Even Jinx admitted she remembered a windowsill warm enough to sleep on through winter. Banner remembered a door. He had spent years believing his job was to wait beside it. Protect what was inside. Trust that the people who left would come back. That job is gone, he said. Gemma leaned against his chest. What is the new one? Banner looked at Rook near the exit, then at the others. I don't know yet. It was the first time he had admitted that. No one seemed disappointed. Near full dark, Gemma's ears snapped forward. She went absolutely still. Banner felt the change before she spoke. The small dog had learned to filter the city, but this signal broke through every layer she had built. Someone like us, she said. Small. Close to the old auto shop. Rook rose. Gemma's eyes narrowed as she listened farther. And a human. Same area. Moving on foot. Focused. Not confused. Looking. Jinx slid off the tire stack and vanished before her paws touched the floor. Sable stood over Clover. How close together? Getting closer. Gemma swallowed. The animal is terrified. The human isn't. Rook's pulse came tight and hard. Contractor. Banner stood. 3 days of quiet ended without anyone discussing whether they were going. They already knew. Chapter 10. They found the survivor behind a shuttered print shop. A small cat had wedged itself between broken pallets and a cinder block wall. Its coat was patchy. One eye was milk white. Every few seconds the air around its body bent and jumped, turning the cat into a sequence of slightly wrong positions, like someone had cut frames out of reality and glued the strip back together badly. Gemma reached it first. We are not the lab or the truck. We smell like you. We got out. The cat's answer was not language. It was a flood. Cold steel. Rubber gloves. A needle. A woman's bored voice saying batch 17. A truck. Darkness. The smell of another animal dying nearby. Then one clear thing underneath all of it. Don't take me back. Banner stepped into view slowly so the cat could see him. He kept his head low. We won't. Rook's warning came from the alley mouth. 30 seconds. Jinx appeared beside him for half a heartbeat, eyes wide. Not one human. 3. That changed everything. A flashlight beam touched the brick at the far end of the alley. Sable climbed in one controlled leap, landed on the print shop awning, and scanned the street beyond. Van. Clover moved close to Banner. Her breathing accelerated, but the panic did not own her anymore. Say when. Gemma pushed calm toward the cat. Move with us. Now. The cat crawled free. The first contractor rounded the alley mouth carrying a collapsed catchpole. The second stayed farther back. The third crossed behind the van toward the opposite end of the service lane. They're closing both exits, Jinx said. Banner understood the trap a second before Gemma did. They had not stumbled onto the cat. The cat had been left where something like them would smell it. Out, Banner said. Clover pulled time sideways. The world thickened. Rain stopped in the air. The first contractor's boot hovered above wet pavement. His flashlight beam crawled instead of swung. Sable dropped from the awning and hit the pavement running. Rook drove toward the narrowest gap between the rear fence and the van. Jinx vanished completely. Banner took one step toward the small cat. A loop snapped around its neck. The contractor at the rear exit had fired the catchpole before Clover's dilation took hold. The aluminum shaft moved slowly now, but the cable was already tight. The cat screamed. Gemma's power exploded. Fear, pain, laboratory light. Don't take me back, all of it slammed through the alley. The nearest contractor staggered even inside the slowed moment. Sable missed her landing by inches and struck the van hard enough to dent the panel. Jinx appeared in the wrong place, claws skidding. Clover cried out. The dilation collapsed. Everything moved at once. The contractor with the pole hauled backward. The small cat came off its feet. Banner charged. A second pole struck him across the chest, the loop dropping around one foreleg. He tore through it before the contractor could lock the cable, but the delay was enough. The rear van door opened. The cat disappeared into a black transport crate bolted to the floor. Rook hit Banner's shoulder from the side. Move. Banner fought him. She's in there. And there are 3 poles, a van, and another vehicle turning the corner. Move now, or we all go in there. Gemma was crying against Banner's leg, broadcasting so much raw terror that he could barely think around it. Sable had Clover by the scruff. Jinx was visible and bleeding from one paw. A second set of headlights washed the alley wall. Banner made the worst decision he had made since waking in the dumpster. He ran away. They escaped through a gap behind an electrical transformer, crossed 2 yards, phased and leaped, and stole seconds through a maze of back lots until the van stopped sounding close. No one celebrated. They stopped beneath an unfinished parking structure where concrete pillars blocked the street from view. For a long time, only dripping water and the uneven breathing of animals who had run hard and failed filled the dark. Gemma rounded on Banner. You said we wouldn't. He took the words without moving. You told her, Gemma said. Her voice was small and sharp at the same time. You told her we wouldn't let them take her back. I know. She believed you. I know. The silence that followed was worse than shouting would have been. Banner could still feel the catchpole cable that had closed around the small cat. He could still feel the exact moment he chose the group over her. The choice had been correct. It still felt like failure. Jinx sat down hard and licked blood from her paw. He also kept the rest of us from getting caught. Gemma glared at her. I didn't say I liked it. Jinx's voice went flat. I said that's what happened. Clover had folded herself against Sable, exhausted from the broken dilation. Can we find her? Sable did not answer right away. She was watching Banner the way she used to watch the door of their old house when something felt wrong inside it. Everyone looked at Rook. The scarred dog stared toward the city for a long moment. The van smelled like the warehouse. Banner's head lifted. Rook continued. Veterinary supply place I told you about. Bleach over animal smell. New locks. Cameras. Sable's eyes narrowed. A cleanup site. Maybe. Banner looked down at Gemma. Her anger had not faded. Good. He did not want it to. Anger meant she still expected better from him. He needed that expectation to stay. I left her because I couldn't save her there without losing all of you, he said. The words came out steady. The weight behind them did not. That doesn't mean I'm leaving her. Jinx stopped licking her paw. Rook's notched ear turned toward him. For a few breaths, no one moved. The decision hung in the cold air under the unfinished concrete, heavier than any of the powers they carried. Banner stood. The old job was waiting at doors, he said. Maybe this one is going through them. Chapter 11. The warehouse had 4 cameras, 2 exterior doors, 1 loading dock, and the smell of bleach thick enough to erase a crime. Rook had been right about the animal scent underneath it. Gemma found that from half a block away. More than one, she whispered. They watched from beneath an abandoned delivery truck across the service road. The building looked ordinary in the way dangerous places often did. Beige block walls, small office windows, A faded sign for veterinary distribution. No logo from the beauty company. No name anyone could remember from a bottle. A private van sat inside the fenced loading yard. The one that had taken the cat. Banner smelled her on the rear doors. Gemma did too. The little dog shook once, then forced herself still. She is alive. How sure? Sable asked. Gemma closed her eyes. Very. Rook kept his body low. 2 humans inside the front half. 1 in back. Maybe more. I can't smell through the filters. There are cages. Jinx's tail moved once. Filters. Air handling. Strong. Pulls smell upward. Jinx looked at the roof vents, then at the narrow gap beneath the loading dock door. Fine. I hate the roof less. They built the plan from what each of them could do instead of what they wished they could do. Jinx would enter first. Not through a door. Through the cinder block wall beside a conduit run where the material was thin enough for her phasing to hold. She would map the inside and come back. Sable would take the roof and watch both approaches. Gemma would stay close enough to read danger through Jinx if she could establish the connection. Clover would hold her power in reserve. No casual dilations. Not tonight. Rook would control the outside route. Banner would be the thing they used when quiet stopped working. Jinx disappeared against the warehouse wall. For several seconds nothing happened. Then her nose emerged from solid block. She pulled back immediately. A moment later she came through fully, hit the pavement, and hissed between her teeth. That's disgusting. Banner waited. 3 humans, she said. 1 in a little office watching camera feeds. 1 in the loading bay. 1 farther in. 12 cages that I saw. Maybe more around the corner. Gemma made a small sound. Jinx looked at her. Your cat is there. Bottom row, 2nd cage. Sedated but breathing. And the others? Clover asked. Jinx's anger changed shape. Alive. Mostly landed badly. There are labels on the cages, Jinx continued. Not names. Numbers. Some have colored tags. Green, yellow, red. The red ones are closest to a door marked hold. Rook's body stiffened. Red means pickup. How do you know? Banner asked. Rook looked at the van. Because I've seen what gets left after red tag pickups. No one asked for details. Gemma reached farther, carefully this time. She touched mines through walls and chemical air. Most were broken signals. Fear, sedation, hunger, pain. One was oddly calm. Another repeated the same memory over and over. A child dropping a piece of toast under a kitchen table. Then Gemma found the small cat. The response came weakly. You left. Gemma flinched like she'd been struck. Banner lowered his head. Tell her we're back. Gemma did. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then, why? Banner looked at the warehouse. Because we said we would. The plan changed at that moment. They had come to get 1 animal. 12 cages made that impossible. Sable understood before anyone said it. If we open them all, some won't be able to run. Rook sent a grim agreement. And some may be unstable. Jinx's eyes narrowed. So what? We pick the ones we think deserve the door. No, Banner said. Everyone looked at him. We open the doors. They decide. The security camera above the loading yard turned toward them. Gemma felt the human attention spike. Now. Jinx vanished. Sable launched. Rook ran for the fence gap. The warehouse alarm began to scream. Chapter 12. The first door did not open. Banner hit it once and felt the steel flex in its frame. Pain tore across his shoulder and vanished under the clean heat of his healing. He hit it again. The lock plate tore free. Inside, the loading bay guard shouted something into a radio and reached for a catch pole mounted on the wall. Gemma pushed before he touched it, feeding him confusion instead of fear. Wrong door. Outside. Something behind you. The man's hand stopped. His head turned. That heartbeat was enough. Banner drove him away from the cage aisle without biting. The man hit a stack of empty plastic kennels and went down under them in a crash of rattling doors. Above, something metal shrieked. Sable dropped from a roof vent onto a suspended storage rack, crossed it in 2 impossible strides, and landed beside the office window. The camera operator saw her and froze. Sable bared her teeth. He backed away from the glass. Jinx came through the office wall behind him. Boo. The scream helped. Jinx hit the keyboard with both front paws, found the bank of door controls by luck rather than knowledge, and began stepping on everything that looked important. Half the warehouse lights went out. The loading dock opened 3 feet. A fire door closed. Then every magnetic cage latch released at once. 12 clicks traveled down the aisle. For one breath, nothing moved. Then the warehouse became animals. A beagle shoved its door open and fell. A gray rabbit bolted into the wrong aisle. 2 cats exploded upward onto shelving. Something large hit a cage from the inside hard enough to bend the door, but did not come out. A terrier with one shaved side stood motionless, unable to understand that the opening in front of him was real. Gemma pushed one message as wide as she could without drowning herself. Door open. Outside. Follow the night air. The reply was chaos. Clover stood at the mouth of the cage aisle shaking. Banner. He saw the problem. The 3rd contractor had entered through the interior door with a compressed air dart gun. Now, Clover caught the moment. Sound stretched. The contractor's first dart crawled through the air. Banner moved inside the dilation like his body had been waiting for permission. He knocked the gun aside. Sable came off the storage rack and hit the man's shoulder, redirecting him into the wall. Rook appeared from the dark loading bay and drove 3 freed animals toward the open dock. Jinx's voice floated from nowhere. Exit is ugly but open. Clover's nose began to bleed. Enough, Banner said. She released time. The warehouse slammed back into speed. The dart gun hit concrete. Animals scrambled. Alarms screamed. The office man shouted into his phone. Banner found the small cat. Bottom row. 2nd cage. The door was open, but she had not moved. Her pupils were huge. A fresh injection mark darkened the shaved skin of her front leg. Gemma pressed herself against the cage opening. We came back. The cat's good eye found her. You did. Banner lowered himself, so his shoulder made a ramp. Climb. The cat tried. Her legs failed. Banner nosed her onto his back instead. Behind him, the calm mind Gemma had noticed earlier spoke for the first time. Take the little ones first. An old beagle lay in a cage with a green tag, though nothing about him looked green. His muzzle was white. One back leg was bandaged. His door stood open. Banner moved toward him. The beagle shook his head. I won't make the yard. We can carry you. Then you won't make the yard. Banner hated how much he sounded like Rook. The old dog looked at the cat on Banner's back. That one still has a next night. A siren sounded outside, real and rapidly approaching from the street. Rook's pulse came from the loading dock. More vehicles. We leave now. Banner did not move. The beagle's eyes were clear. Listen, there are other places. This is not the lab. This is where they sort what escaped the labs. Gemma went rigid. Sort for what? The beagle looked toward the red tag door. Some go back. Some disappear. Some get opened so they can see why we didn't die. A hard impact shook the loading dock door from outside. The beagle pushed himself upright long enough to nose the cage door wider. Go make their sorting harder. Banner wanted to refuse. He could not make the numbers change by wanting. He touched his nose once to the old dog's forehead. Then he ran. The escape was not clean. It was nothing like their drills. A tabby went the wrong direction and Jinx had to appear, bite its tail, and drag it toward the dock. Sable carried Clover for half the route after the dilation took too much from her. Rook shouldered the limping terrier through the fence gap. Gemma broadcast direction until her own senses started smearing together. Banner took 2 darts. The first struck his flank and snapped against muscle before delivering much. The second buried in his shoulder. Cold spread through the clean warmth of his healing. His legs tried to fold. The small cat tightened weak claws into his back. Don't. Banner stayed up. They crossed the service road as the first marked police car turned toward the warehouse entrance, and the private contractors shouted over one another behind the fence. Rook led the survivors into a drainage channel, then beneath a highway ramp where the city noise shattered their scent and the concrete held old rainwater. Only when the warehouse lights were a distant glow did they stop counting bodies. 7 had made it out with them. The small cat. A limping terrier with a shaved side and a stubborn set to his jaw. 2 cats. The gray rabbit. A hairless little dog whose skin trembled with faint blue sparks that flared whenever he was nervous. And a heavy mixed-breed female whose shadow kept moving a fraction of a second after she did. 7 from 12 cages. Gemma looked back toward the warehouse. What about the others? The question hung there without an answer. The old beagle's comm signal was gone. So were several others. Banner lowered himself carefully so the small cat could slide down beside Gemma. They had gone back. They had opened every door. It still had not been enough. That truth stayed with them longer than the sirens. Chapter 13. They hid for 2 days in the skeleton of an abandoned greenhouse at the edge of a dead nursery. There were too many of them now for the place to feel empty. The original 5 took the positions they always took without thinking. Banner near the widest entrance. Gemma against him. Sable and Clover together where broken glass could not reach them. Jinx above. Rook near the outer dark. The rescued animals filled the spaces between. Some left before the first sunrise. The two cats chose each other and disappeared toward a residential district after Gemma gave them the safest route she could find. The gray rabbit stayed one night, then followed a scent trail toward parkland. The heavy mixed-breed female never gave a name, but before she left she pressed one clear thought into Gemma's mind. If I smell you again, I won't hide from it. The limping terrier stayed. He had already decided Rook was his problem and followed the scarred dog everywhere with the quiet determination of something that had once been told to stay and had never unlearned the order. The others started calling him Patch because of the shaved side and the way he treated every new injury as a temporary inconvenience. The little dog with blue sparks stayed too. He was smaller than Gemma, hairless, and constantly trying to be useful. The sparks flared when he was anxious or when he concentrated too hard on a problem. He never offered a name, so Jinx started calling him Sparks, and the name stuck before anyone could argue. And the small cat they had gone back for. She slept almost continuously the first day. On the second evening, she woke beside Banner and looked around the greenhouse as if surprised it had remained real while she slept. Gemma nudged her gently. You still don't have to tell us your name. The cat considered that. Then she sent a faint, dry pulse that felt almost like Jinx. Maybe I need a new one. Jinx looked down from the iron crossbeam. Finally, someone with taste. The cat's damaged eye narrowed. Pixel. Jinx blinked. I withdraw my objection. Patch gave a low, approving sound from Rook's side. Sparks' skin flickered a brief, nervous blue. It was the first time anyone laughed since the warehouse. The laugh was brief, but it was enough. Later, Rook gave them what he had learned from the smells around the cleanup site and the routes of the vans. The warehouse had not been unique. He knew of 2 other districts where private vehicles disappeared behind buildings that carried harmless names. Gemma had felt enough frightened minds inside the first one to know what that probably meant. Clover sat very still while he talked. So there are more. Yes. More animals like us. Yes. And more places sorting them. Rook did not answer that one. He did not have to. Banner watched Pixel sleeping between Gemma's front paws. He thought about the old beagle. About 12 open cage doors. About 7 survivors reaching the drainage channel. He had spent most of his life believing success meant keeping everyone inside the fence safe. The New World did not allow that kind of success. We can't break into every building, Sable said quietly. No, Banner said. Jinx's tail swayed above them. Good. Because I am not phasing through another office wall that smells like disinfectant and human feet unless the universe personally apologizes first. Gemma looked at Banner. But we can help them find us. That was where the idea began. A trail was too dangerous. Anything they laid down could be followed both ways. A gathering place was worse. Too many bodies meant too much scent, too much attention, too easy a target. A sign. Something only animals carrying the same chemical ghost would understand. Rook knew crossing points used by strays, ferals, and the altered survivors who had learned to move between the city's blind spots. Jinx knew which alleys humans ignored. Gemma could tell them how faint the scent needed to be. Sable chose locations with more than one exit. Clover pointed out the obvious flaw in every plan until the plan stopped being obvious. The object itself was Banner's idea. An empty youth restore bottle. They found one near the landfill fence, weathered but intact. Jinx complained the entire time Banner washed it in rainwater and rubbed the label clean enough to remove the strongest human scents without erasing the words. Cruelty-free remained printed across the back in small neat letters. Nobody suggested peeling it off. Inside the bottle, they placed a torn strip of cloth that had rested for a night among the group. Enough shared scent to say like you. Not enough to lead a contractor home. Pixel approached at last. She sniffed the opening. Her outline stuttered once. Then she touched the bottle with her nose. Not alone, she sent. Gemma looked at Banner. That works. At dusk on the third day, they left the greenhouse. The group was larger than the one that had arrived. Messier too. Clover still tired too quickly after hard dilations. Jinx's injured paw made her swear at uneven pavement. Banner's shoulder carried a shaved patch where Gemma had finally worked the dart free. Pixel walked close enough to touch him whenever her vision stuttered. The limping terrier had decided Rook was his problem and followed him everywhere. The little sparking dog sneezed blue static when nervous. They did not look like heroes. That helped. They looked like strays. At the chosen alley, Banner placed the bottle on its side beneath a rusted fire escape, where rain would not immediately wash the scent away. Rook checked both ends of the block. Sable watched the roofs. Jinx vanished and came back with a board clear. Gemma listened. The block held only ordinary city noise, no focused human attention, no van engines. Banner looked down at the bottle. The same kind of bottle had been under his feet when he woke, surrounded by animals that had not survived the testing. The same kind of bottle had rolled through the dumpster while Gemma shook against him, and Sable dug Clover out of the trash, and Jinx cursed the whole world for existing. Now one sat deliberately in the dark, transformed from garbage and evidence into a message. They left before anything found it. Ahead of them the city continued, ordinary and dangerous and mostly unaware. They had woken in a moving dumpster full of the beauty industry's trash. Now they were neither waiting to be someone's pets nor merely running. They were a unit that practiced when practice mattered, shared food, broke cages when they could, carried the ones who could still be carried, and learned the harder lesson that opening a door did not guarantee everyone would make it through. They carried the chemical ghost with them, along with their scars and the memory of the ones they'd lost. Behind them, under the fire escape, a bottle that once promised visible results held a different promise now. It promised neither safety nor rescue, only recognition. You are not the only one. The eyes that had begun to notice would keep looking. So would they. And for the first time since the dumpster, the story they were moving through belonged to them.